All right, good morning. Welcome back to the Lookout. Today's the 12th of July. We're talking about the Shelly Fire, which is burning in Siskiyou County near the town of Etna. Some new developments on the fire, so we're going to jump in there and look at it. If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Zeke Lunder, and this is the Lookout. I cover fires from a kind of mapping and intel perspective. I've been in this work for about 25 years. I started my career working for the Forest Service on a timber crew, and then ended up getting into mapping in college, and right when they were starting to use mapping on fires for in the fire camps to kind of provide faster turnaround for maps for firefighters. So I like to use the tools that I learned how to use working on fires to kind of tell stories about how fires are being fought and help people understand how this stuff works. So good morning, and thanks for having me on here. So we're going to jump into some maps right off the bat to look at what's going on with the Shelly Fire. What's new is that yesterday the fire made a run out in the wilderness, and it kind of spotted into, it became better established in upper Kidder Creek in places that hadn't really been active for the last 4 or 5 days. So you can see here, here's kind of the Shelly Fork of Kidder Creek, and the fire kind of started out in here and ran early last week. It ran across here and became well established in kind of the upper part of Kidder Creek, and then it spread down over the last 5 or 6 days down towards the valley fairly slowly. Anyway, yesterday with kind of pretty steady southwest winds in the afternoon, the fire kind of ran up out of here. This is kind of what we call the heel of the fire. And it spotted up around into Kidder Creek. So we're going to take a couple different looks at what that means. Alright, so just to kind of orient you, we've got Etna down here, Fort Jones up here, and Greenview right around here, Quartz Valley up here. So if we look west up Kidder Creek over the Kidder Creek Adventure Camp, you see that the fire's pretty much been holding for the last 4 or 5 days on this ridge here, and that they actually put dozer line and hand line up this ridge. And so I haven't gotten updated fire line mapping for the last day and a half, but there was dozer line to here, and then hand line. I don't know what's been done up here in the last, say, 24 hours. Yesterday the fire continued to spread down into Patterson Creek, so this is Patterson Creek over here. And the white line is 24 hours of fire spread before midnight last night. This perimeter out here is the fire line, or the fire's edge at midnight last night. So 24 hours of spread, you can see that it's not really, it's backing slowly. It's not spreading very fast. So we've got really dry conditions out there, and heavy fuels in thick forest. This kind of backing fire behavior, if we had milder weather and milder fuel moistures, would be what we'd want to do with a large-scale prescribed burn. So when we talk about, when we do prescribed fire, we start it at the top of the hill, and we'd like it to back down slowly, consuming the fuel on the ground without getting up a lot of momentum. And what we like about backing fire is that the fire itself isn't preheating the fuels downhill of it. When you have a fire that starts at the bottom of the hill, the heat from the fire rises up the mountain, and it preheats ahead of itself, and it dries the fire fuels to kind of critical levels, and that's why fires run fast uphill. It's that the heat of the fire lays over and it cooks everything right above it and makes it critically dry, and then the fire can spread fast into that. So it's the same thing as like lighting a barbecue, or a pile of dry grass or kindling in your barbecue. If you light it on the top, it kind of gets going slowly and it backs its way down to the bottom. If you light at the bottom, heat goes up and your fire takes off a lot faster. So we're going to talk, I'm talking later today to a woman whose company manages all this timberland for the private equity company that owns it. And we're going to talk a bit about what their vision is for the property. But certainly in landscapes like this that are fire prone and adjacent to areas that burn often, we've got to talk about how we're going to get prescribed fire in there. And so what you can see right now is obviously backing fire in thick forest when it's 105 degrees out and 20% humidity. We're going to have a lot of mortality. We're going to kill a lot of the trees in here. But if you ran the same fire through here in the late fall, maybe you could do a lot of the same kind of work without killing all the trees. So Patterson, fire had not, as of midnight, crossed Patterson Creek. It had kind of slopped over the ridge here. There's a lot of bulldozer line out here. It's a little hard to see, I think, but all this black line is bulldozer line from a couple days ago. And so basically what they've done in Patterson is they've built this box and had a lot of time to prep it now, of dozer line and hand line, with the idea being that if they get favorable winds out of the south, they can do a firing operation. They can light fire off this dozer line, and it'll create a buffer here, so when this fire does come up out of here, it'll run into a nice wide kind of fuel-free zone because we've burned the fuel off. Now that's difficult. Firing is how we contain big fires like this, and it's difficult to do a firing operation with these conditions without a high risk of escape or spotting or just destructive fire effects. So even if, and it's difficult for them to go direct, what we'd say go direct, of like putting firefighters in here and chopping line and containing this fire in the bottom of the canyon. So right now the fire is kind of held up at a road here, and conditions have been pretty mild. You see the fire spread this far, and it's spreading through things like rolling out and short range spotting. So on this steep ground at the bottom of the slope, with this whole slope above you that's got heavy fuels that's been burning for days, it's really easy for stuff to roll across this. And this road, while it's checking their fire right now, there's no guarantee that this fire is not going to roll out. When it rolls out, if it does roll to the bottom of the canyon, then we'll get runs up this other side. Sorry for all that. Up this way. So difficult job for them to hold it direct. If we have super stable conditions and the smoke packs in and we have no wind and good nighttime humidity recovery and everything else, it's not impossible that they'd hold the fire here, but it's pretty unlikely. So what happens when it runs up out of there? And does that happen before they get an opportunity to fire this? That's something that's going to unfold over the next few days. So the biggest news really on the fire today is like this is just kind of continuing to unfold slowly, and oftentimes that's what happens on these big fires, is it takes days or weeks for things to really unfold. Another part of the story between the fire and Etna is that this green with yellow outline, this is all recently thinned stuff that's been done on the private timberland with CAL FIRE funding. And so this started in, it's been going on for the last couple of years, it looks like. And so this is thinning. There's kind of a road corridor through here, and they've thinned along it. And then down in the flats, they've thinned a little heavier around where there's a lot of structures down here. Timberland ownership. Yeah, so this purple here is lands that are owned by EcoTrust Forest Management Investments and managed by Jefferson Resources. And we're going to be talking to Danielle Lindler from Jefferson about the work they're doing here. And then all these yellow dots are structures. Another thing we've been talking about, we're going to talk to Danielle about a bit, is that this black area here of the EcoTrust ownership is in a carbon offset investment. Basically, they've got 18,000 acres here, and they are getting paid to grow carbon, store carbon, and they can sell those credits to someone who's polluting. And so we're going to talk to her a bit about what happens when an offset burns, and who's on the hook. Like, someone got paid to grow this carbon, who's on the hook then to like buy more carbon somewhere else to replace what got lost. The idea with carbon offsets, one thing that this company EcoTrust is doing is that they say they want to use the money from the carbon offsets to do restoration activities and thinning to improve the resilience and make it more likely that they'll be able to grow larger trees here that are more fire resilient. So looking forward to talking to Danielle about that. Anyway, this particular thinning work, it's not super tactically well placed as far as if the fire comes up over this and burns down the other side. It's rare for us to try to hold major fires on a mid-slope line, and so oftentimes having stuff like right down adjacent to the community like this will be helpful. But if the fire does kind of blow up out of here, it's going to spot all over the slope, likely, and this will improve firefighter access and egress, but it's not necessarily in a great location to help contain the fire as it moves down the hill. But it's a place they had access, and it's also a good place for them. Like, in starting this work, if you were going to try to do prescribed fire and burn from the ridge down, this would give you a nice area to kind of, if you could burn from the ridge down to here, it gives you a place where you could kind of potentially manage a larger prescribed fire. So big picture on Patterson side, they want to fire this. They need specific winds and they need specific weather conditions, and right now things aren't great for people that want to do a firing operation, in part because you've got 103 degrees today, minimum RH of 12. That's just super crazy burning conditions. Next week it's going to be 95 every single day, and it's going to be humidity in the teens. And so basically when you've got those conditions, you've got what we call a probability of ignition of 100%, meaning that if you throw 100 matches out there, all of them are going to start new fires. When we do prescribed fire, often we're looking for a POI of maybe 70%, because that makes it much less likely that if you have embers across the line that you're going to have problems with new fires spotting. The winds are pretty favorable come Sunday, but next 2 days we got these max winds in the afternoon of 12 to 13. The fire forecast for in the IEP today is less optimistic of that. And they're coming kind of from the west and southwest. So also we've got here this Haynes index is kind of a metric for instability in the atmosphere, and it maxes out at 6. So when you see that you've got 6 for the next 3 days, it tells you that atmosphere is going to be extremely unstable. And this ventilation rate here is kind of a tool for prescribed fire people to tell you how well the smoke's going to move out. And the smoke's going to move out extremely well. So one good thing is that the maximum humidity is coming up. For a while there last week, we were not getting good humidity recovery. So if we do get super strong humidity recovery at night, if you look at the minimum temperature and the maximum RH, these are the conditions that you'd be aiming for burning at night. Just the problem is that when you put all that fire on the ground, it's going to be there for days. And so even though it might hold for you, during that time period from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. that you put it on the ground, 12 hours later, you're going to have these extreme kind of burning conditions. In today's IAP, the incident meteorologists say that conditions are going to be warmer and drier versus the past couple of days, and there's some potential for pyrocumulus, so big kind of mushroom clouds, to develop on top of the column because there's a little bit of moisture in the atmosphere. And today we're supposed to get some fairly strong winds in the afternoon, 14 to 18 after 2 p.m. with localized gusts up to 25. So that's kind of what drove the spread of the fire kind of up and out yesterday. So that's the next thing, and kind of the final thing to talk about for now, is that fire started back in here, it spread out this way, and they haven't really been able to do a lot of firefighting on the original fire spread in the backcountry. And there's some reasons for that, like if you come in and look at where it's burning, you've got this incredible amount of dead and down fuel and snags, and it's just really kind of impossible to fight fire on these steep slopes in those conditions. So what happened yesterday, the fire kind of rolled out, did whatever it was going to do, and it made a run, and so it blasted up over the top here, and it's now really well established in Kidder Creek. So the PCT kind of runs through this divide here. They've been working really hard to keep the fire in Kidder Creek, out of Mill Creek, and the fire continues to spread here kind of where they haven't been able to kind of go direct. They've been able to go direct up this ridge and hold it really well, but we've been watching this and knowing that this is a really kind of treacherous place to try to engage a fire. Like very few options to get people out of here if you drop people down off this ridge basically to engage the fire. Very few options to get them out if the fire blows up. So now the fire is really well established on the other side, and it's established up in here. One thing I wanted to pull up here is just our fire history and see, like, is this in the so this burned in 2019. So that actually will be helpful. We got a small fire here that burned in 2019. This burned in 2017. So this 2019 stuff, 5-year-old burn, looks like probably cleaned up a lot of the understory. But likely the fire is going to kind of continue to spread up in Kidder, and if that happens, it is still likely it could get into Upper Mill Creek. Upper Mill Creek burned 10 years ago, so that does buy some advantage in that it reduced a lot of the fuels. But we still have this kind of problem of the heel of the fires continuing to spread with very little control. And so even if we control stuff that's happening here, if the fire can continue to kind of spread up and out of here, then it'll continue to kind of be a problem and kind of work around the back of the firefighters. So when we talk about firefighting, we talk a lot about having a good anchor point, even on a grass fire, like that's 30 by 30 feet. You want to start off fighting the fire at the edge of a road or something where you can ensure that your fire line is tied into something and the fire doesn't kind of sneak around you and come back and attack from the back. Right? So the problem we've got here is there's just really no good anchor point for them to tie in. When we say if there was a rock outcrop or something out here and you could start constructing handline from there and know that in two directions the fire's not going to squirt back around you. So in the larger scale, fighting fire without an anchor point is a watch out situation, and in the big picture, this fire has no anchor point in the wilderness, so it can continue, no matter what we do out here, it can continue to kind of turn around and outflank the firefighters. These purple lines were kind of proposed fire lines a few days ago in the fire line data. This one obviously is a bit compromised in that there's fire on both sides of it. I think they've likely been working on this, and we'll just see if whatever happens here with the strong winds in the afternoons, if they're able to hold that. So I'll fire up some of the some comments here. Someone's asking about big fires in Eastern Oregon. Wildfire 371 says potential lightning and wind issues ahead as this crazy ridge breaks down. Angela McCormick says, why do they need a prescribed fire? Good questions. I should be able to do something at the end here on the fires in Oregon. Why do they need prescribed fire? I was going to show real quick a graphic that this is to talk about why we need prescribed fire in this particular landscape. This is the Klamath River corridor here, Orleans, Somes Bar, up to Happy Camp, and then over here is Scott Valley. You can see in between here there's been a ton of fires in the last 100 years. And a lot of that, some places that have had multiple fires actually have some of the remaining large trees. And we've got this huge area here kind of between our fire and Scott Bar, coming out to Highway 96, that just hasn't had fire. So let me see if I can kind of turn off some of the stuff here. And so we need, one way or another, we need to get fire back into these landscapes because the fire is going to burn a lot of if we get it in at the right time, if we can do it as a prescribed fire, we can burn up a lot of the sticks and dead trees and accumulated stuff that's fallen down in the last 100 years that fire normally would clean up. So we've had historically a ton of lightning in this landscape and fires before we started putting fires out, we'd have fires here every, 5 to 15 years. And those fires, often lightning fires, would start on the top of the hill and back their way down, and they would clean up the forest. And so without that, one person I was talking to about like how much material accumulates at the bottom of a 200-year-old tree, and someone said, well, if you stood for one place for 200 years, there'd be a lot of crap around your feet too. And so that's why we need prescribed fires, to really clean up the mess. And prescribed fire also kills a lot of the small trees and keeps forests from being overly thick. So right now we've got this area here that's in brown where the Kidder Creek fire is burning. That burned in 1955 and it hasn't had a fire since then. So now we've got this fire that's burning in there, and it's got this extreme amount of fuel to burn. So if we can put prescribed fire into here in the spring or fall when it's not critically dry, yes, it's going to create a lot of smoke, and it's definitely going to make people kind of worried and trigger people's anxiety. But it will reduce the fuel loading and make it more likely that we'll have green forest in the future. If we don't get fire into this landscape one way or another, we get it in July when it's 102 degrees and 10% humidity. And what we were looking at yesterday is some recent satellite imagery of this fire. And you can see that brown generally means that there's nothing that's going to be surviving. Like, this is all going to be just black stick forest. You got this little blue island here where the fire was kind of spotting around. There'll be some on the lower slopes and in some of these kind of sheltered areas. There's going to be places where there's surviving forest. But a lot of these areas here that are in brown are just, after this, are going to be a forest of dead sticks. And there's a reason for that, and that's because we haven't had fire in here for 70 years. So that's why we need prescribed fire. It's difficult to get prescribed fire on the ground, to find those windows, and to get people who live down at the bottom of here to put up with smoke. But the alternative, if you look at the landscape I'm from in Lassen County, is no forest. And that sounds dire and it sounds kind of absolutist, but like around where I live, where I grew up in Chester and Westwood, like there's 100,000 acre chunk of land that won't have forest, won't have large trees on it in my kids' lifetime. So The patient is sick. The cancer is bad, and the treatment, the chemotherapy and the radiation, it's gonna look bad. The patient, but the patient needs that intrusive action to survive and to keep our forests. All right. So, done here. Leslie Lannon says her son's in there, smoke jumper. Thanks for his work. Smoke jumpers are. That's the reason we have smoke jumpers, is to work in these deep wilderness areas. I think one of the tough things for the smoke jumpers, a lot of the ones I've talked to, is that they know that what they're doing is wrong as far as putting out all these fires, and that that's one of the reasons that they one of the reasons we have such bad problems with heavy fuel accumulation and everything else is that we've been parachuting people into the backcountry to put out all these fires. So it's tough to be in suppression and do prescribed fire, and to know that every time we're putting out, the smoke jumpers put out a lot of good fires too. And then when we get a fire like this, they're put in danger because of the terrible fuel conditions out there that they helped create. Same with the hotshots. The hotshots have been kind of the grunt troops in the war on nature, war on wildfire, and then we end up putting them into more and more dangerous places because of all the good work they've done, the good work in putting out all the small lightning fires are burning in the off season and everything else. So it's tough stuff, but occasionally heroic. All right, I'm going to shift gears here and jump in to look at the lake fire. So if you're watching from Scott Valley, I appreciate your attention, and if you want to learn about the lake fire, stick with us, and if not, we'll catch you again. We'll be following this, and we'll see you around. So, my wife's from down here, Santa Barbara County, and I really don't know that much about it, so it's kind of hard for me to cover stuff super well down here because I don't know the ground. A guy sent me a pretty interesting story yesterday about this area, and I can read part of it. Let's see if this... Alright, so lake fire, it's largely contained on a couple flanks. This is Santa Ynez Valley, Cachuma Lake area. 101 comes through here. Here's Sedgwick Reserve. So these areas that have a red outline but no infrared heat, they're pretty much out. We're not seeing heat out there. And then these areas are the big orange, like kind of pushing in on Sedgwick, and kind of not really threatening Michael Jackson's legacy at this point. Michael Jackson's legacy's on vinyl and will never die. Little fire ain't gonna hurt the legacy of MJ. But yeah, pushing hard, kind of on this east flank, a little bit on the south, and then it's really well established out in here, and kind of who knows what's going on there. It's just kind of having its way. So, if you look at Zaca Lake maps here, you can see that they're calling this yes sir, thank you Adobe for your buggy software. Yeah, they're saying that, hey, we got hand line, dozer line through here, and this stuff is black. It's what they're calling contained. We've got two zones here, CAL FIRE team and a Fed team, and you can see the CAL FIRE dozers have been quite active, as happens on these large fires. You give a bunch of dudes with dozers free rein to go tear shit up, and they do. And so they've torn some shit up, and some of it's going to hold the fire, and some of it is just going to be old dozer line. Anyway, a lot of dozer line. You come around this south end where the fire's real active, and these guys aren't sharing their dozer line, so I can't put it on my map. Anyway, lots of dozer line. Some of it will hold. Like we said before, the best way to guarantee that your dozer line is gonna hold is to get a hotshot crew out there and fire it. And unless that happens, oftentimes dozer line doesn't hold up because the fire, when it gets there with a head of steam, just jumps over it, and or no one's out there to see it happen. So, in my opinion, if you didn't let anyone push dozer line without a squad with them that was capable of firing and holding it, you probably would up your percentage of. You'd probably have to put in less dozer line, and you'd have a better chance of it holding. You know, ideally, you have a dozer that's assigned to a hotshot crew, and the hotshot crew can decide where they want the line because they're the ones that are going to have to fire it. Because you often see dozer line inside the fire, where it pushed and it was somewhere they had that was maybe a tactical opportunity, but unless you have time to get that dozer line fired and mopped up, oftentimes it's just going to end up being inside of your final burn and have wasted a lot of people's resources and caused resource damage. Anyway, the backside of this fire, they're not showing any containment. They have a road out here, and it's kind of held up on that road for a good portion here. But like we saw in Shelly, they might be able to hold that road, but if they don't hold it out here, odds are decent that the fire will just kind of come back around and burn that part anyway. They got some dozer line out here protecting schoolhouse and Davis cabin, and Cody cabin, Dabney cabin. They got some planned hand line out here along this ridge. That's a lot of, each one of these is a mile. Hotshot crew can cut a mile of line a day in decent fuel conditions. So you look at this and you'd say, like, okay, so either we need 6 days or 6 crews and 1 day to kind of to prep this line. But that's kind of the strategy right now. It looks like they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 15 miles, 20 miles of hand line out here in this San Rafael wilderness. And that's why these fires get big, is the question is, like, okay, is the fire going to get there before the line is prepped and fired? And you see like stuff like this where it squirts out like a mile or two in a day, and then you see, okay, we're 2 miles away. Like, there's decent potential with a southwest flow. Fire gets into the bottom, burns up out of this drainage, it keeps it going. So when we look at like the Zaka fire and other fires we've had in this landscape that burn 400 square miles, it's just because some dudes on foot with some chainsaws and hand tools oftentimes aren't going to get this done in time. Even if you get that done in time, then you got to put 20 miles of fire on the ground, and you've got to hold 20 miles of firing without dozers. It's a tall ask, and you're putting people out there in this pretty wildly hot, dry, gnarly landscape without a lot of options for where they're going to get in and out. So you got a hell spot here where they're flying some crews in, but if you're going out in here, that's like a 3-mile hike from the hell spot just to work. So we'll see what happens there. It's all about the weather too. If the weather decides that it's going to cap this fire with a high pressure, but so far, unlike the Klamath, what we're seeing down here is that this fire is kind of cranking fairly unhindered by an inversion, because we're not in deep, steep canyon country like we have on the Klamath. So that's your update. Santa Ynez side, this is active, this is not so active. Not a lot of heat out in this area along the road, but looking at their kind of big, long hotshot fuel break, a lot of work, no guarantee of anything good happening there. I'm going to read real quick email I got from someone who grew up out here. This is from, where did he send it? It's from Ben Munger. He says, "Hi Zeke, I may be getting out ahead a bit, but the artist families that live back on Manzana Creek are staying put and working with fire crews, as the ops plan may use Manzana and the Sisquoc River to hold the fire to a smaller footprint than the Zaco fire. Typical for artists, the houses are all hand-built timber frame with cement and river rock infill. The houses are not big and have large defensible space surrounding them. Just think of the artists who really like bulldozers and disc large areas and been collecting firewood for 50 years. The in-holdings are 360-acre homesteads from the 1870s that are part of a small community, including a sawmill and a school. The sawmill was water-powered and cut gray pine for the community. They could not afford to get better quality pine, but produced modest ranch farm harvest, which they'd take on hoof or in wagons down and sell to Santa Maria. The Sisquoc Ranch, a Mexican land grant, stopped allowing them to cross their property and take produce and animals to market, and it led to families leaving. The Sisquoc Ranch also resurveyed its boundaries and found some of the homesteaders were on their property and paid them to leave in the beginning of the national forest. And the forest prevented homesteaders from burning regularly. It eventually led to almost full abandonment of the area, besides the Davis family, who held on and built a mining road to various prospects, which also allowed them to leave Manzana by vehicle. That road's pretty much cut off by fire backing into it off of Zaca Ridge, leaving the homesteads and the folks out there isolated from the fire crews that are in need of them." Alright, that's interesting. So let's see. So it looks like they're talking about out here, like the Davis cabin, the schoolhouse. Both of the families left there are stone carvers, mainly serpentine from the Franciscan Formation area. Their work is collected, and at times they've had galleries in Los Olivos. Used to be art places, now a wine place. Fires backing into Lion Canyon, where there's an unusual red serpentine. But they get the road made. They get their rock from a road cut, and the fire burned into Sedgwick Reserve. Road cut is on Figueroa Mountain. All right. Anyway, I like getting stuff like this. Give us some idea. Like, I think he's responding to the fact I said, oh, it's mainly backcountry. There's hardly anyone out there. And so it's nice to be reminded, like, oh, there are some people out there. They've got an interesting story. And so feel free to send me stuff like this. Give me an idea, because like I said, I don't know this country very well. This guy said he spent many years documenting the archaeology of the area with the Forest Service. It's very isolated and has great wilderness characteristics, but go back 500 years and it was a very high Chumash population who were connected to the coastal communities. So the indigenous depopulation of the area was no different than others in Southern California, with the Spaniards coming in. Anyway, he says, I hope this helps for context about the area you aptly noted as backcountry. Alright, so I had a request to look at fires in Oregon. I don't have a lot of intel up there, but we can look at the heat satellites and see what they have to say about it. This person was asking about Eastern Oregon. And then I gotta go to work, so let's see what we got. Okay, so leaving SoCal. So we were looking at the fire up by Medford a couple days ago, and that one doesn't appear to be doing much. So usually on this heat satellite, if it shows up yellow, it means that it's not detecting new heat. So this fire here up by Medford shows it's active on the south end and really not doing much on the rest of it. So this is on the road between White City and Klamath Falls, west slopes of Mount McLaughlin. I don't see a lot going on in Central Oregon. There's this fire here out kind of on the Wainema by Silver Lake. A lot of this area has had so much fire out in it that there's not a lot left to burn. Don't know much to say about that. And then so I see a couple fires here. There's one that's kind of northeast of Burns, and there's another big one out here kind of east of Unity. I haven't been out on fires out here for about 18 years. This one out by Burns looks like it's it's active and it's got potential. Unless I have some time to dig into these, all I can see is like, hey, there's heat there. Stuff out here by Unity, these fires spread quickly in kind of grass and sage, and often they get picked up. Like this fire, you've got this kind of irrigated alfalfa lands, and like often they get picked up off a road system. They'll do a large firing operation, and they get contained within the major road systems. Doesn't look like there's a whole lot out there to really threaten. But large fire, let's give it a measurement real quick. $20,000 acres in a day. That's pretty impressive. What I like about the satellite stuff is it gives you kind of a big picture view of like where's action, and that helps you figure out like right now it's not, we're at a planning level 4 nationally, which means it's they're starting to be drawn down on resources like hotshot crews, and fire season's full on. Planning level 5 means like there's fire in lots of different places, and there's not a lot of resources left, interregional resources. So they coordinate interregional resources like hotshots and air tankers out of Boise, and they get to decide, hey, the last hotshots are going to Idaho, or maybe hotshot crews from Montana are going to Eastern Oregon. When you get to planning level 5, it just means like everything's committed, and that's when they start calling up Australians and Canadians and looking for whatever they can get. So right now it's like, yeah, there's a few large fires. There's not anything crazy big, nothing that's threatening a whole city or anything. And so but these are good tools for just kind of getting a big picture of like what's going on. Okay, we got a big fire in Southern California. We got kind of Shelly's really not a very big fire. Got a 20,000 acre range fire in Eastern Oregon that's not going to get a lot of resources. And then what's often interesting is that you'll often see that there's a ton of small fires all over the southeast. Anyway, that's what the satellite stuff's good for. Not so great for tactical level, but great for seeing kind of trends. So check the comments, and then I got to go to work. How close is this fire to I-5 freeway? You talking about SoCal? The fire down Lake Fire's nowhere close to I-5. The fire in Northern California is about 20 miles. Dudes with dozers equals new fire t-shirt. Wildfire 371 was glad to hear Ben Munger's history. Louise, our fuel specialist from the Klamath, says Eastern Oregon is such a huge cheatgrass ecosystem now outside the irrigated areas that the fires get very big very fast. Yeah, that's a great point. Invasives have really changed. So like another kind of big picture view here is we've got California, we've got the green kind of coastal forests where the coastal moisture piles up on land and is really wet, and even like the west side of the Sierra Nevadas and the Cascades, these mountain ranges wring out all the moisture from storms coming from the west, and we've got really productive soils and moist conditions, and we grow trees really well. And then all of Eastern Oregon and Nevada and Utah is kind of a rain shadow where all the moisture from the coast kind of got wrung out by these big mountains and really dry. And cheatgrass cheatgrass came in kind of with the railroad. It's not a native species, and it kind of ends up blanketing the landscape. And so you see here, like, all these yellow areas are cheatgrass, and these are wind-driven fires, you can see, that scarred this landscape. And this area that's not that light tan is sagebrush. And so the cheatgrass, sagebrush isn't really fire tolerant. And back before we had, a ton of grazing and native invasive species, annual grasses, we had a lot more perennial bunch grasses that, because of the drought conditions, they'd grow in clumps, and maybe each bunch grass would have, like a few feet around it before the next grass with a deep taproot, and they come back every year. And so that made it hard for the fires to spread unless you had high wind. It was because you had this like patchwork of dot of individual grass plants. So the annuals come in every year, and they just make this fine carpet of grass, and so the fire can just spread super fast through there. And cheatgrass, it doesn't grow very tall, it's just kind of furry, and then it dies. And so when you look at kind of the entire Great Basin, you start seeing these areas of cheatgrass where the sagebrush is kind of, in a lot of places, just gone. And then you get these fire scars, and these fires run. Like this fire with high wind, you can see it just like ran like thousands of acres. Often with times, what happens out there is you get a fire like that, and then you get a couple of cool nights with the humidity coming up, and the fire kind of just goes out. So like you can see here, this fire, like there wasn't really any suppression on this part of the fire. You can see like maybe they pushed a dozer line around here, and then a lot of the fire just kind of like, when the wind stopped blowing and the humidity came up at night, the fire just stopped where it was. So pretty awesome little illustration there of like cheatgrass invasion. But then what happens is, looks like this might like even be seeded after that. You got this massive scale of the problem, and then that cheatgrass now will carry fire, and it'll burn more sagebrush. So thanks for bringing that up, Louise. Like, it's a real problem across the entire kind of Great Basin and dry American West. Sorry, I swear I'm driving all over the place. Is fire is driving these changes in the landscape where we're losing sagebrush and getting more cheatgrass. And basically, sagebrush provides a lot of habitat. It provides browse. Cheatgrass doesn't really provide habitat for anything. So it's a raw deal, and it's one of those things that's happening at such a large scale that it's kind of impossible to do anything about it. But like even in the late 90s, early 2000s, we saw like an explosion of kind of cheatgrass driven fires spreading more cheatgrass across the Great Basin. And that concludes our meanders through West Coast fire ecology. Thanks, you guys. Reminder that we're user sponsored, user supported. So if you like this stuff and you want to pay for your own little masterclass in fire ecology that's delivered in an ad hoc basis when I have time, contribute to the Lookout. You can go to thelookout.org, the-lookout.org, and there's a donate button there. You can find us. And if you subscribe at like $5 or $10 a month, it really helps me out with paying my internet bill and my light bill, and buying some cameras and buying fuel so I can drive around and look at things. So appreciate all the support. You can also buy merch on our website. Get yourself a Lookout hat or a Lookout coffee mug that my wife made out of mud. She didn't make it out of mud, she made it out of clay. But